everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm Jordan Hill with Rusty Mansell. Rusty, how's it going today?
Oh man, back at it and trying to get some warm weather and spring practice in the air. And kind of looking at my high school schedule. You get a little bit of break. We obviously covered a team that went a little bit later than usual this year, and you go right into signing day. And then, Jordan, you come right on board. Next thing you know, we got all these coaching changes. So it really hasn't slowed down as much. Maybe the last 2 to 3 weeks has kind of been a little bit, I would say, tempered down a little bit, but it's been full speed pretty much. So, you kind of look at your schedule and things start ramping up. I got a question for you. How was it you guys got to see spring practice? I mean, you got to physically stand inside the Butts mirror and watch Georgia practice. Were all you guys like group hugging? I mean, it's been like 2-3 years for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought we were going to have to storm the door. I didn't know if, they might change their mind, not let us come out there. But yeah, it was really neat to go out there on Tuesday. Got a chance to watch about 20 minutes, which, man, it's never, it's always this way. But, man, those 20 minutes go by pretty quick once you're seeing all the groups in action. But, yeah, it was really interesting to get a chance to go out there, walk around, watch practice a little bit. Get to see, some of the offensive line groups, see some of the guys in action, see some of the new coaches. I had a chance to listen to like Chidera Uzo-Duribe with the outside linebackers, seeing Stacy Searles out there, seeing Mike Bobo walking around, just kind of checking out what was going on. A lot of people on the sideline, a lot of people watching along with the media. But it was really cool to be back at it. Obviously that's the first time I've gotten to watch Georgia practice since I've been back on the beat. And if I'm right, I think, nobody's really gotten on the media side a chance to watch these guys since probably October, I think is what I was told, sometime around that Florida game. But yeah, I mean, it was, go ahead.
Vanderbilt week to be when it was, because it was kind of like, okay, they're playing Vandy. He's going to let everybody in for about 10 minutes. So, yeah.
For sure. And yeah, I wrote a little bit about this, and I'd recommend everybody to go on there, kind of read the practice reports, practice observations. It's going to be really interesting to see this offensive line, the sort of what they're going with. We got to see Xavier Truss in there at left guard. I think we're going to see a lot of different people, especially as we go through the spring, just trying to find those best combinations. And that's something that Warren Erickson talked about, getting the right five, getting the 5 guys that can work together and work well. So it was nice to see kind of a little touch of that. I don't know when we'll get to see practice again. And I think I kind of alluded to this when I wrote about it. It's probably going to be a little different next time we see it. I think we will see them kind of mess and try to tweak it and see what works. But it was really interesting to get to see that. And also to just see some of the guys, that I've gotten to watch, but on TV, but getting to see some of those guys like Jalen Carter and seeing Trey Scott right there working with him and cheering him on and getting him going. There's a lot of questions, and I think Kirby Smart talked about that Tuesday night, with certain positions. But, man, there's a lot of talent. I know they've lost a lot, but they're looking to reload, and it was really a good chance to kind of watch these guys in action. And again, hopefully that was the first of many. I don't know how many times they're going to let us out there, but it was definitely good to kind of get to see those guys and kind of get a little preview for what we'll see at G-Day.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously know all these guys, covered most of these guys on this roster, and I think when people see it up close for the first time, I talked to a lot of recruits and stuff, especially young players and parents that go to Georgia for the first time and stand on the sideline, and you realize that how big this team is. And that's one of the things that Kirby Smart changed pretty quickly was the size of the offensive line and the defensive line. We got a lot of young talent there, and it'll be interesting to see. I think, my question is, they can do a lot of different things in the spring, get a lot of different guys, a lot of different reps, get Stacy Searles in there working with the guys. He's meeting the guys. They kind of get his flow. He gets their flow. But, I think going into the summer, for me, it's going to be Tate Ratledge. This is a guy that, unfortunately on third play of the offensive year against Clemson, had the Liz Frank injury, and that's a bad injury for a big man. You're talking about a guy at 6'7", 325 pounds. So it's a weight bearing issue there. So he's had to, take his time with that. Can Tate Ratledge get back to where he was? Obviously not doing anything in the spring other than doing some heavy lifting and upper body stuff and walking around. He walks with a boot sometimes he doesn't. So you look at that room and how deep it is in the interior. How can they do it? We get a lot of questions on Amarius Mims right now. Warren McClendon and Broderick Jones are clearly, to me, settled in at the offensive tackle positions. But, they're not been afraid. Going back to Sam Pittman through Matt Luke, and we'll see with Stacey Searles. They haven't been afraid to rotate tackles. So we'll see what they do. We'll get, obviously, hopefully you get a chance to get back in there. If not, we'll get a good chance at G-Day to see how they work out the rotation some.
Fingers crossed. I'm going to hopefully get a chance to go out there. And you kind of hit on with Tate Ratledge, I think, a point that's going to be really important going forward is, this is an opportunity for guys that can step up because of some of these injuries. And a guy that, I've heard a lot about in the last couple of weeks, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, a guy that when I brought him up to Kirby, he's like, it took me a minute to know who you're talking about. We call him Pop. And they call him Pop because the way he's hitting out there. And I mean, a lot of guys were really excited about him. Nolan Smith was singing his praises. And, it was no surprise when we were out there on Tuesday that he was running with the first team. Yeah. And, I think he's a guy that's got a lot of promise. I think he's a guy that, when we talked to Nolan, he talked about, when he was in games last year, he didn't get many reps, but he made the most of them. I think he had a pick 6 against UAB. Mm-hmm. He said, he's out there causing fumbles, stuff like that. This is a prime opportunity for somebody like Pop to take advantage of and say, with Smile Munden not being able to be out there, this is a prime opportunity for a guy like him to show that, hey, he's ready. And it'll be something to watch again, even going through G-Day to see what other guys are able to step up.
Yeah, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to realize what they lost over there. They've got a very, very talented roster. What you lose is experience. I think Kirby Smart, said 7,000 snaps or something like that, which was crazy. But you lose a guy like Nakobe Dean, who is well documented how smart he is. This is a 4.0 GPA kid. And you lose somebody like that. You not only lose athletes, you lose a leader lining people up. Everybody, makes a deal out of him kind of crawling Channing Tindall on that crossing route in Alabama game. But I mean, that's a leader. You know what I mean? I mean, that him and Channing Tindall are tight. They're buddies, but he let him know he really was wrong, and he almost cost Georgia a touchdown off of that play. And the next play, Channing Tindall comes back and makes sacks Bryce Young for like a 15-yard loss. So, the little things like that don't get mentioned enough are a very big deal. So we'll see as the spring comes out. Leaders are made in the spring and summer, and those player-led workouts, especially in the month of May, when they do those little team 7-on-7s. And as they get into June, where it's heavy player-led, we'll see what kids kind of rise. I know Nolan Smith will be one, and obviously Stetson Bennett being the starting quarterback at Georgia will have to carry on a more vocal role as well.
Talking about Stetson, we actually had a chance to talk to him on Tuesday night. It was really interesting to kind of get to pick his brain. And before we kind of focus on the football thing, it was really interesting to be in the room with somebody who was a clue on a Jeopardy game show that night. His name got mentioned on Jeopardy, and he was like, somebody just texted me about it. He was like, they could have made it harder. They could have asked who the quarterback was. He said nobody would have gotten that. So I think he kind of understood it quite well. But seriously, though, getting a chance to talk to Stetson, it was really interesting just to sort of hear him talk about the last few months. I mean, he admitted that, I think he said, well, the world exploded there for a minute, something like that. It's just been so busy. But the perspective he showed, I was really intrigued by. He talked about, hey, when I was in high school, I was a starting quarterback. Everybody knew who I was. He talked about when he first came to Georgia, obviously he was on the scout team. I think a couple people wrote about him getting ready for that Rose Bowl because he was playing Baker Mayfield for the scout team. And, he talked about obviously there's a lot more attention than he's used to given what he was able to do and obviously helping Georgia the way he did. But, he talked about perspective, and he talked about the people around him and making sure that, basically he wasn't overwhelmed, that he wasn't spreading himself too thin. And it was just really interesting, too, on top of all that, with all the media attention, with all the NIL stuff, he talked about, we were like a week and a half behind because of how long the season went. He said, usually we're done playing around New Year's Day. And, they played, I think that was January 10th that the championship game was. So he was very, on top of the fact that there needed to be a sense of urgency with everybody. And, just to hear some of that perspective from him, it was really intriguing. I think he was really candid with stuff and talked about, the stuff he's had to deal with. I think some of it trial by error, again, with sort of like the attention. But it was really good to just sort of get to hear from him, see how he has kind of approached things. I mean, from everything I can tell, he did it with a really level head. And imagine, it kind of blows my mind to try to imagine, being a guy that age and you got all this attention, but he very well understood that he's got another year to get prepared for. And I think, based on what he was saying and also what Kirby had to say too, everything I have seen tells me that he's done it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, you grow through things like that, and what Stetson Bennett went through, only Buck Bellew would know, as far as I know, as a living quarterback, and it's a little different day and age than Buck Bellew 41 years ago. So Stetson Bennett, you're not prepared for something like that. You have to go through it, and that's a good problem to have. So we're not sitting here crying baby for him. Quarterback at the University of Georgia won the national championship, and there's a lot of media, there's a lot of requirements for that. And I've known Stetson since he was a junior in high school down at Pierce County. Came to my MVP camp down at Lowndes High School. Had a chance to meet his father and him, and he's been through a hell of a roller coaster for the University of Georgia, leaving, coming back, but winning a national championship. There's a lot of stuff that goes with that, and I think you have to refocus. I think Georgia, from what it sounds like, has done a really good job of kind of clearing the air, clearing the table. This is a new season, and last year means nothing when it comes to this season.
And another point I kind of want to hit on with Stetson that I hadn't really thought of, but I thought was something very interesting and something that makes this spring very valuable for him. Stetson talked about that he felt like he could get better, and Kirby had said something very similar a few minutes before we got a chance to talk to Stetson. But he talked about the reps. He said, Kirby said this time last year that Stetson was running with the threes, and you look at how valuable this time for a guy as experienced as Stetson is, how valuable this time can be. He's talking about, well, say this time last year, I'm probably not in the ear of the receiver saying, hey, run the route this way, run it this way. But, they know that he's the guy. He's going to be the starter. And they've been able, not only does he have that respect to be able to say that and go to the receivers, kind of tweak things, but they've been through a lot. A lot of these guys, at least several of these receivers, obviously they have those reps. They've been in games. They kind of know what to expect from each other. I think that's crucial. I think, at first glance, when you hear a quarterback, especially coming off the season that Stetson had, say something like, I think my best ball's ahead of me, you kind of wonder, well, is that, along the lines of coach speak, or, well, yeah, you're going to say something like that. But I think it's a really good point. I think that this is a chance really for him to grow another year in this offense and sort of knowing the expectations. I think he's right. I think it's a really good opportunity for him. And it's going to be something that, we may be looking at while, when we get to the fall to see if real progress was made in these weeks and months.
Yep. I mean, I can imagine the amount of conversations they've had with Stetson Bennett and some of the things that he's learned. But, it's like I hear coaches talk about this, especially head coaches. You don't really know what it's like until you sit in that seat. And Stetson Bennett is now a national championship starting quarterback. You start looking at Carson Beck, Brock Vandergriff, all those guys are, Gunnar Stockton's obviously the early enrollee. The quarterback is a totally different mentality deal. And it's one of the hardest positions in the world. You look at the NFL right now, and in my opinion, there's 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. There's about 8 or 9 that can play on an elite level. And you're talking about 8 or 9 people in the world. So you look at Stetson Bennett in college and what he returns, it's invaluable what the experience he's got to be able to stand in that huddle and call a play and know the other 10 other guys believe in him to get it done.
Well, we'll take a quick break real quick. Then we can come back, talk a little bit about some of those early enrollees. Also talk about recruiting, maybe some more guys that are going to be joining the Bulldogs here before long. just a second ago, Rusty, we mentioned a few of those early enrollees. I got a chance to watch a few of the guys the other day at practice. Ernest Green was kind of getting in the mix, one of those young offensive linemen. What have you heard about any of these early enrollees? Anyone who you feel like is kind of making a mark, or even guys we just need to keep an eye on going forward?
You hear things different days, like, hey, this young guy had a good practice or this guy had a good practice. I think consistently, overall, so far, a week and a half into spring practice, I think two guys that have kind of, I keep hearing their names, are Michael Williams, a five-star outside linebacker, defensive end out of Hardaway High School in Columbus. And that's really no surprise to me. And Georgia fans, that's good news to them, because obviously what you lost, and I'm not sure Michael start, but I'm pretty confident if he stays healthy and continues to progress, that Michael Williams will help this team. And that's the most important thing as a true freshman. It's great pass rushing skill set. I mean, he was dominating. He was, in my opinion, he was the best player out of 70 All-Americans in Texas. He was the best player on the field. I mean, he was dominating. And so for him to have early success, kind of know his background, who he is, very, very high academic, high character young man, comes from his family there in Columbus. So doesn't surprise me. But Denylon Morissette is a guy that, he got kind of banged up his senior year, wide receiver at North Cobb High School, kind of got set back a little bit this year, and took him a little while to get in. He had a wrist injury. Ironically, he got hurt at a 7-on-7 team camp at Georgia last June, and it really set him back a little bit as the year went on. But this is a young man that kind of, he stays in his own lane. He works hard everywhere. I've seen him compete. His junior year was at Brookwood, senior years at North Cobb, and since seeing Denylon in person and knowing what type of work ethic he's got, I remember going to North Cobb several times, and Shane Queen, the head coach there, a longtime head coach, said, "Man, Denylon is like, he walked right in. He's like the leader of our team. Like, everybody loves this kid. He's never late. He stays after, works extra reps. I mean, this kid's a real, in his opinion, a 5-star type player." So that's good news too for Georgia. They want some guys to step up. But at wide receiver, I think Denylon Morissette is a name that has consistently been brought up to me. And obviously Michael Williams, the former 5-star prospect out of Columbus. Those are two guys getting a little bit of buzz. Ernest Green's a guy that, when I saw him, I think he weighed 355 when he weighed in. I thought, man, he's pretty big. He's going to have to lose some weight. But, man, when we got into pass rush out in Texas and doing the one-on-ones, and they had him at left tackle, and he's about 6'3", so he's not a real long kid. But kind of remind me of Jamari Salyer, to be honest with you. A little bit maybe taller than Jamari, but I thought, man, this kid might can play tackle, but his long term probably will be inside. So he's another true freshman out of California, a guy that Matt Luke closed on to end this class, which was a big deal. Got down to Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, and they go out to California to get him. So when you look at that, that's a name you kind of tuck away as this offensive line group shapes up going into the summer.
No doubt about it, and I had a chance to talk to some of his coaches over there at St. John Bosco. Obviously, a very impressive program, and seems like he's well set to be able to contribute as well. And the receiver, like you said, Denylon, I think that, he's got a real opportunity, and I think it's something that Kirby, with any of the early enrollees, hasn't shied away from. I mean, he's hit on the fact, especially at receiver, Kirby talked about on Tuesday that we don't have a lot of depth. I mean, this is a real opportunity for someone like Denylon, any of those guys, to have a chance to step up. Again, with some of those guys who are out, this is sort of a proving ground for a lot of these guys. And even if they don't get in some of those starting roles, they could wind up being very significant contributors by the time we get to the fall.
Yep, we're going to see. And that's, our message board is, who's showing out in wide receiver? Is Georgia taking one in the portal? And who are we recruiting? So obviously, if you look at the list that we put up this morning on Dolphs 247, expected visitor list tomorrow, not this weekend, the one tomorrow, man, that is you can tell Brian McClendon is casting a big net and recruiting guys in an area that he's very familiar with, especially in Florida. So the wide receiver room is one I think Georgia has a lot of room to make some growth. Donnie Mitchell, I know I butcher his name every time, so I'll just say AD Mitchell.
Yeah, that's what I go with. Just go with AD.
I'll go with AD until I get that one down. And he is clearly with Brock Bowers out, Darnell Washington out spring. He's clearly the guy right now. And I heard he has separated himself in that wide receiver room. And that catch he made in the national championship, you saw him talking about ball skills and the ability to get on top and stack a DB and make a play like that shows a lot of him.
Yeah, when we had a chance to talk to George Pickens at Pro Day, someone asked who was the next guy. There was no hesitation. He just smiled and said, AD. It's going to be AD. So you talked about some of the visitors. I think we would be remiss not to talk about one of the big visitors from this past weekend, five-star quarterback Arch Manning. Rusty, just what do you know? What's sort of the feel from Arch coming back and checking out Athens? And what maybe is sort of the timeline, or what should we expect next as far as he's concerned?
Well, next for him, he'll be at Texas this weekend on a 2-day visit with his family. And then I think he has now set up a 2-day visit in April to Alabama. I'm not sure the weekend of that, but he is going to Alabama in April. You have to be – this one's one that you get questions and texts. Like I get texts from people that don't even have their phone number locked into my phone like, hey, are we getting Arch? I'm assuming it's a Georgia fan. I'm very – guarded with this one because this is just so many eyes on this recruitment, this decision, this young man. I'm confident, though, in saying that Georgia is a serious contender. I've said that from day one. Georgia will be in this thing all the way until the end. Now, there's no points for second place for an Arch Manning. That would be rough, but you got to be in this thing to have a legit shot. Georgia has a legit shot. He doesn't do interviews. Kind of have to talk to his high school coach. You kind of have to talk to a lot of people around this. And what I gather on this is they really like the town of Athens. His family likes the town of Athens. They like that college atmosphere. They're really impressed with the offensive line room. Some guys that potentially, if he was the guy here that would be in front of him, it's very, very deep room. And, knowing Trevor Lawrence and his family so well, being from basically my neighborhood here, that was one thing that they were really, really high on Georgia with, was that offensive line room. And you go back and look, all them guys, there were several guys that were first-round draft picks that came out of that room. So, you look at it, a lot more goes into a quarterback decision than just, hey, can I play early? You got to have guys around you and what's in front of you to protect you. So there's a lot. Buster Faulkner's a guy that doesn't get a ton of publicity because he's an off-the-field quarterback analyst. But they really, really like him. He has a great relationship with Cooper and the family. Mike Bobo coming on is a guy. He's also an analyst. They know him as well. Kirby Smart. There's a lot of connections there between the Manning family with this current Georgia staff. So Georgia's a legit contender for him. Now I'm going to say this, and I'm just trying to piece things together around this. Most people don't think this is going to get into July. Most people think at some point in June, he's going to try to make a decision so he can completely focus on his senior season and recruiting players to the school he chooses. Now, the question I always get is, what about NIL? With NIL with them is not really a heavy focus because, number one, that family's they're pretty deep now financially. Let's just not beat around the bush. But saying that, they understand in today's college football scope in the world that we're in there, that if Arch Manning goes to a school and he is successful, it's going to be unlimited. They'll be in line to pay him to endorse products. The name, image, likeness for an Arch Manning would be off the charts. It'd be something unheard of. So, with that, I think they understand it will come with him, and it will come immediately. But NIL hasn't been a big focus discussion with those guys at many of the schools, from everything I understand. And, they understand. But I want to say this, too, about Arch Manning. I don't think people give him enough credit. This kid's almost 6'4", 215 pounds. He can dunk a basketball. He's got a rocket arm. He can move. If his name was Arch Smith, he would still be a top-level high school recruit. Just because he's got that Manning name attached to him, I think sometimes people go, is he really that good? I dug into him and dug into some people that I trust with quarterback evals, recently. And man, I mean, I didn't realize how big he was. I mean, this kid is legit 6'3.5". I mean, that is a big dude. Quick release. He can sling it. He's a better athlete than people think. So you package everything around him like that. And that's why there's so many eyes on him. But he'll be at Texas this weekend. And I know for sure he'll be at Alabama in April. Not sure of any other visits after that. Maybe Georgia can get him back one time. I know Georgia's staff will be down at his school in May. Kirby Smart cannot go down, but the assistant coaches can be down there. So you would expect Coach Monken at least to be down there, and the guys that are on the road, the 10 coaches designated to be on the road in the all-important month of May. But Arch Manning, with that, Georgia is very, very deep into this, and we'll see if they can land him.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to follow. Obviously, we'll be all over it at Dogs 247. And again, if he does ultimately commit to Georgia, it'll be interesting to see the domino effect, who decides they want to be a part of that class as well.
Yeah, he's going to set off he's going to set off a lot of different schools. So when he picks, just say he picks Georgia. Just say he picks Georgia. Well, Alabama and Texas have got to refocus where they're at. Some of these other schools are involved with that too. So there's a lot of dominoes that will fall with someone like that.
Rusty, before we wrap this up, any other recruiting, visits or people we should be watching out for, or just sort of the landscape of what these next few weeks look like for Georgia while they're also going through spring practice?
I think the biggest thing people kind of, the board last night at the Junkyard was kind of like, hey, why are we not getting commitments? Well, this is a visit time, and people don't realize, these recruits understand that these visits can be taken away from you in a heartbeat. So this is a time that prospects are seeing multiple schools going around. They're going around seeing schools, visiting other kids, they're doing 7-on-7. Kind of in my experience, June, this new recruiting calendar with official visits in June is usually a time where those decisions start getting made, the early decisions on these elite prospects. So I don't think right now there's going to be a ton of decisions around the country. You might see some, but, for me, there's those visits. Then there's spring practice, in the southern states, Georgia, Florida, all these places, all the coaches will be back on the road. And then you start thinking about early January, early June, those official visits start taking place. And that's when you start seeing a lot of movement.
Yeah, it'll be something to watch. Obviously, Georgia also got a 2024 commit, cornerback Antoine Jackson. So we'll see if more people jump in line with him before too long. Well, Rusty, I think that's about all I got. Anything else we need to hit on before we wrap this baby up?
We can wrap it up for the next one.
Yes, sir. Well, and hey, let's give a shout out, well wishes to Kip Adams. He'll hopefully be with us maybe the next episode or the episode after that. Hoping that he comes back and is ready to go, man, because we got a busy couple months as we get ready, getting closer to the season.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, all right. For Rusty Mansell, I'm Jordan Hill as always. Thanks everybody for listening. We're gonna get out of here on that. Until next time, take care.